Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Kneon. We're going to talk about the DC Comics Bloodbath, the aftermath of the Red Wedding at DC Comics. Now, look, I want to be clear. I'm not taking delight in this. I don't like it when people lose their jobs. It's never a good thing. Their families suffer for this. The flip side of this is that this should not surprise anyone. This has actually been a long time coming. WarnerMedia doesn't give a poop about DC Comics. They don't care about the comic book publishing business. They haven't for quite some time. And, you know, these comic book publishers, both Marvel and DC, have been living on borrowed time. There have been rumors. I know EVS said before that he was hearing that DC Comics was living on borrowed time. We've been hearing on the Warner side that Warner was going to trim things mercilessly. I didn't know how that would affect DC Comics, but it seems like they're actually one of the first casualties of the cutbacks, and it's going to get worse. As I understand it, this is just round one. There are going to be more cutbacks. I don't know if there will be more cutbacks at DC Comics, but WarnerMedia for sure is going to cut back on more divisions. Now, before I get into it any further, just a reminder, guys, we do have only a little over 2 days left on the Clownfish TV pin pre-sale that we're doing. When they're gone, they're gone. We're basically getting a batch of these enamel pins made. Most of them are going to go to people who pre-purchase them. We're going to get a few extras for ourselves, but that's going to be it. So 2 days, a little over 2 days. You can go to shopclownfish.com for information on how to order that pin. So here's the thing. Let's talk about this because it's pretty bad, guys, but the entire comic book industry at this point is in a state of flux, and I don't think the direct market is going to survive. I mean, they're talking about cutting the books back at DC and Marvel. What are shop owners going to sell other than back issues? They're having a hard enough time staying in business as it is. Because of the pandemic, a lot of shops have shut down permanently. It's just not worth it. Now we're talking about getting rid of, a third, a quarter, a half, whatever of the comic lines from DC. And we don't even know what's going on with Marvel. Marvel is also canceling a lot of books too. So there's definitely going to be a major change in the direct market. A lot of comic shops that are staying open are actually switching to games. We have a shop right down the street, actually, that survived the pandemic by selling games online via their eBay store. That seems to be the way that everything is going right now. And, look at what else is going on in the industry. IDW is losing money. They just fired their new publisher for God knows what reason. They're not going to survive the pandemic. I don't think. Valiant has vacated their New York City offices. I don't think they're going to survive the pandemic. So if DC Comics is laying a bunch of people off, where are all these people going to go? Because it seems like the fallbacks, and we know that Dynamite is no longer embraced with open arms by the comic book industry. To make a company just renounce any association with Van Sciver, with Comicsgate, and a lot of creators said, well, we're not going to work for Dynamite. We're not working for Dynamite anymore. Well, you're probably not going to be working for DC. You're probably not going to be working for IDW, and you're probably not going to be working for Valiant. So I'd love to know where you're going to work. You're not going to work in manga because your stuff is not the right style. Where are you going to work? So I don't know. I don't think the comic industry has thought this out, but let's talk about after the bloodbath, the start of a new 2-year plan for DC Comics. I think the 2-year plan is they're hoping to be in business in 2 years. And Rich Johnson had to kind of backpedal on calling it a bloodbath because some people said, well, that's really harsh. Comics Beat also called it a bloodbath. This is what employees working at the company were calling it. They were talking about, the people that were laid off. We don't know what is going on with Jim Lee. They said he was being transitioned out of DC Comics originally, but now he's going to stay at DC Comics, but he might not be in charge. Marie Javins, Michelle Wells will be taking the publishing role, reporting to Jim Lee. We've got some other folks here. Gone are Bob Harris, Mark Doyle, Bobby Chase. They've all been in the industry for decades. Andy Corey, Hank Canals, Eddie Choi, Sandy Resnick, Sarah Haskell, Jonah Weiland. I mean, look, it's going to start with these people, with the executives, and then they're going to work their way down. Well, we're not going to call you back for work because we've only got a third as many books as we had just a couple of weeks ago. So Rich Johnson said, with so many staff leaving the company, around a third is estimated, the continual production of comics is likely to take a hit. But the graphic novel line, which has become more valuable to DC, is so far in advance of production, no one would even notice until next year. The comic shops would notice because they're not getting new weekly comics. So because we also hear about what is described as a 2-year plan for DC Comics, which will see DC Comics move to mass market production through Walmart, the licensing of titles with editors moving to brand manager approval roles. I freaking told you guys this is what Disney was looking at doing. And I know this for a fact because I had it coming from people who worked at Disney Worldwide Publishing, that this is what Disney was going to do with Marvel. That basically they were going to have an office full of brand managers oversee comic book and graphic novel production. They weren't going to have in-house staff. They were going to like have people from other countries, from like Norway or something, produce the comics or produce the comic art, and or have Tokyo Pop do manga versions of the Marvel characters, and then we'd have Dark Horse do more traditional stuff or movie tie-ins. That's the plan, or that was the plan for Marvel as of like 2 years ago. I don't know if that's still the plan, but it sounds like DC Comics is doing something similar. And again, this is what Ethan Van Sciver was talking about, his contacts at DC Comics telling him that DC Comics as a publishing house, as we knew it, was probably going to end. Now they're trying to backpedal on this and be like, no, comics are fine. Comics are fine. Like, the fucking house is burning down. Multiple publishers are going to go out of business. Comic shops are going out of business. DC Comics is having a third of its staff laid off for now. There's probably going to be more. The stuff might get outsourced. No, comics are not fine. The direct market is not fine. Manga's fine. Manga's doing really well. But the direct market is fucked. Absolutely, positively fucked. And the sooner people get this through their heads, the easier it will be to accept the changes that are coming. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't make comics. It doesn't mean that people won't make comics. They will find a way to make comics. They always find a way to make comics. But going to the comic shop, getting your new comics every week, those little pamphlets, and paying $4 or $5 for those, that's gonna probably end real soon. Real soon. All it's gonna take is for Marvel or DC to flinch. I honestly thought it was gonna be Marvel first, but Marvel will follow, because Disney is going to look at this and be like, yeah, why are we doing comics this way? We're hurting for money. We're actually in worse shape than WarnerMedia. Why are we doing it this way? Let's just gut Marvel Comics too while we're at it. So they said alongside a move from DC to digital serialization in the original graphic novels, digital's content will still be provided to the direct market, but will no longer be the priority. It is also notable that the collected editions department at DC has seen a considerable winnowing, almost as much as DC Direct. Print collections of currently serialized work take a lot less time to produce than the remastering, archiving, and retrieval of classic work in new and appealing formats. I understand that this is coming from Rich Johnson. I understand that Steve Geppi may be trying to get what remains of DC Comics back to Diamond, but there are reports that the distribution of print comics may go completely in-house, and that UCS and Lunar were just the start, a trial run. Yeah, I believe that. Bleeding Cool made the comparison to the DC implosion of '78. I think this might actually be worse. That almost saw the publisher's first comic book, Detective Comics, canceled. This time, the Bat books are the safest. It's been pointed out repeatedly that a better comparison may be the Marvelation, is that what they call it, episode of 95 that saw Marvel Comics take their distribution in-house and increase their line significantly, and the Marvel Cution that followed in 1996. But it's also worth reminding folks that this does happen periodically. It's okay. Comics are fine. Comics are fine, everybody. No, they're fucking not fine. They're not fine. They haven't been fine for a while, and a lot of these journalists don't want to admit that the industry is in the state that it's in, because one, it means that they're out of a job because they can't justify their own. I mean, Marvel and DC go tits up. You can't justify your own existence anymore. You're not covering them. Avatar Press, which I think Bankroll is bleeding cool, they're not going to get their books sold because the comic shops are going to fold. So yeah, it's not in your best interest to say, yeah, you know what, comics are screwed. Absolutely screwed. But they're going to keep saying that the sun is coming out tomorrow, and it is going to come out for some creators who are smart enough to get the hell out of the direct market. What this is not is the closure of DC Comics. Nobody ever said that DC Comics were going to completely disappear. Nobody ever said Marvel was going to completely disappear. We're talking about the implosion of the direct market, and it's coming soon. It's coming real damn soon. Comics have moved on. Viz is actually selling more manga now than they did before the pandemic because it's cheap and it's easy to get a hold of, and there are stories for everybody and every taste, and they're doing really, really well. It's the direct market that's screwed. So comics are going to be fine. A major change, absolutely, and the comic book market is going to get another hit at a time it's least suited to be able to absorb it. No shit. No shit. But just as this has happened before, it can lead to a new comic book publishers setting up a new swath of talent for the rest of the industry to benefit from, and a chance for DC to focus on what it really wants. But it's also going to hurt. No, this is going to be cataclysmic, because so many people working in comics right now can't move on to what's next, and there is a way out. There is a way out. Look at crowdfunders. Look at selling direct to consumer. Look at manga. Look at, doing things in a more unorthodox manner. If you are a comic creator and you have an entrepreneurial streak, you can survive this. You can transition into something else. If you have no entrepreneurial drive, you're not going to make it. And now is not a good time to be a socialist. I'm just saying. Like, you got to be a capitalist. You got to figure out what people want, and you got to be able to sell to them, because there's not going to be any cushion for you. There's not. DC Comics is gutted. IDW and Valiant will probably go out of business. Dynamite, y'all made sure that everybody was going to stay away from Dynamite with your rumor mongering. Okay, they might go out too. Who the hell knows? But there is a way out for creators who have that drive, that same drive that guys like Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld had back in the day, where they wanted to make a shit ton of money making comics that everybody loved, and they wanted to tell the world about comics and get people excited about comics and not depressed about comics. I'm tired of talking about comics in such a negative way. Believe it or not, I don't like it. I really don't, but that's the only news in the direct market is bad news, because the direct market has chosen to fail. It's like going into somebody's house when they're in a deep depression or mental state, and the curtains are drawn, it stinks to high heaven, it's dark, the lights are off, and you're trying to tell them, hey, you can get through this, you can get through it, and they don't want to hear it. The comic book industry doesn't want to hear it, and people try to give them options. They tell them you can crowdfund, you can sell direct to consumer, you can do this or do that, focus on this. They don't want to hear it. Instead, they want to demonize people who are actually, in a lot of cases, trying to show them the way forward. And it might be with DC Comics, if they are going to survive, they're going to have to look at these other business models, including manga, and be like, this is the only way forward we can see, because it's working for them. We have to make it work for us too, or that's it. There's no purpose anymore to doing this, because the profit is not there. And people keep arguing, well, they're profitable. DC Comics is profitable. Marvel Comics is profitable. You don't understand how these companies think. That doesn't mean they're profitable enough. They have to be profitable enough. They have to be pulling their own weight, or they're going to take those salaries and they're going to allocate them someplace else. And the comic book industry, for years, the writing has been on the wall. They've chosen to fail. That's the only thing that I can take away from this, is that the comic book industry, the direct market, has chosen to fail time and time and time again. They've had decades to get their shit together, and now it's too late. It's just too late. And I'm sorry. I am sorry for the people who lost their jobs, who are probably out of the industry now because there's no place else for them to go. But it doesn't have to be you. If you're listening to this and you are entrepreneurial and you're talented and you're willing to give people what they want, you can get through this. So I'm going to wrap this one up. Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, and we'll talk later. Hey guys, thanks for watching Clownfish TV. Please consider supporting the channel. Go to clownfishsupport.com. That's clownfishsupport.com. And if you want to join our community, go to clownfishtalk.com. That's clownfishtalk.com. Please subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. We will talk to you next time.